From the time they're thinking about their company merely as a concept, future entrepreneurs, wantrepreneurs, some of them, are told how to keep it simple. How would you describe your company in one sentence? What's the elevator pitch for your company? Hence, you think it's the one question every entrepreneur has a perfect answer to. Well, not always, and that's okay. Because as entrepreneurs become entrepreneurs and as their ideas become living and breathing organizations, their tight, well thought out one lines start to live and breathe and evolve too. Some founders have answers that you'll find them using everywhere without hesitation. Others like to take you on a journey with their answers, answers that may not fit neatly on a pitch deck, but that are more philosophical. Sometimes questions from me help, like, how do you see your company today versus when you started? Or, how did you arrive at this business ahead of others? Or, how would you describe your company? What does it do? Comparing the guest answers might seem a bit foolish because it's not a fair comparison. But I must say, there is one constant they all cater to: the customer. Delighting the customer through your existence is what it's all about. So today we have a supercut where we asked 5 of our earlier guests these questions. Now, not all of today's founders function under similar conditions or markets. 3 of them live and breathe in very crowded sectors with one too many competitors, but have stood their ground and made their mark. Also, if you're getting a regular dose of Shark Tank this season, then you already know 2 of the guests we featured in this episode. And one founder who started out at 40. All of the founders had interesting answers as to the purpose their businesses serve. Radhika Gupta said,
Edelweiss Asset Management and is a company that tries to solve problems for customers. It tries to solve financial problems for customers using the mutual fund platform.
Lalit Keshre thinks of Groww as
It is like a we it's like a multi-product platform.
in Ritesh Agarwal's book, OYO today is.
Leading global hotel brand.
Karthik Jayaraman had a simple explanation for what WayCool is today.
We are a supply chain company. At our heart, that's what we do.
And Neeraj Singh had a longish answer which explained an average Indian's aspiration and why Spinny exists to serve them.
My personal life journey and the way I have seen Indian society.
The part where it gets interesting is when they expand further on how their businesses help customers' lives. And they explain how, some in unexpected ways, the reason for their business's existence and how they delight their customers. We thought we would shift the focus of the supercard from our usual focus on founders to what they've built and the industries they're in. I feel we might have come a bit short on making that separation because there is no separating a founder from what they've built. And I must add, in no way is that a bad thing. Welcome to First Principles. I'm your host, Rohin Dharmakumar. Let's get started. Hi, it's Rohin again, but this time as the co founder and CEO of the Ken and not just the host of First Principles. I'll take roughly a minute or two to introduce you to one of our lesser talked about product offerings, narrative workshops. When we started the Ken in October 2016, we were hyper focused. We'd publish just one original long form business story each weekday for individual subscribers who bought our annual subscription. That's it. We would say no to anything and everything else. But after the first few years, we started expanding our offerings very slowly, often at the rate of one new product offering every year. Corporate and campus subscriptions in 2018, newsletters in 2019, stories from Southeast Asia in 2020, podcasts in 2021. Each of these expansions came about because our subscribers wrote to us, asking us for them. They took us where we went. In 2022, we launched narrative workshops because numerous subscribers wrote to us saying they loved how the Ken writes and communicates across its products. They loved how we told business stories. They loved our narrative techniques. And could we teach them all of the above? Unlike other product requests that we'd received from our subscribers, this one was a curveball. We'd never thought of ourselves as teachers. Practitioners, yes, but teachers, no. So I ended up speaking with a bunch of subscribers to try and understand why they asked us what they asked us. With that subscriber insight, our own experience, and well, a smidgen of gut instinct, we launched our narrative workshops offering in the month of our 6th anniversary, October 2022, together with my colleague Praveen Gopal Krishnan, aka PGK, and Ruhi Kandhari. In his day job, PGK is also the Ken's COO and writes our incredibly astute and yet reliably unpredictable Saturday newsletter, The Nutcruff. Ruhi, apart from authoring our weekly newsletter on narrative writing called Inciting Incident, has been a staff writer with us nearly for the entire duration of the Ken's existence, except for a brief period she left us to write her first book. In our workshops, we're never the teachers, and I do mean never. But we're always the practitioners because between the three of us, we now have close to 55 years of collective experience. P.S. I hate to say this because it reveals how old we are. Since we started out nearly 2 years ago, we've done workshops with just 18 organizations, in large parts because the three of us are kept on our toes due to our day jobs. Thus, we restrict ourselves to working with a maximum of one organization in a month so that we can share, not teach, the accumulated knowledge we've built up over the decades on impactful, narrative-driven storytelling in a more meaningful manner. We're currently opening up slots for a few organizations to work with us over the next 3 to 6 months. So if you'd like to know more about our workshops and consider them for your organization, you can reach out to us at theken.typeform.com/narrative. Don't worry, I've added the link in the show notes too, so you don't need to memorize it, along with a few examples of what these workshops look like. Thank you, and now let me switch back to my host persona. First up, we have Radhika Gupta explaining how the function of Edelweiss Asset Management is not to be yet another AMC, that's asset management company, but to solve the problems money can solve for people. How would you describe Edelweiss Asset Management as a company? What does it do?
Edelweiss Asset Management and is a company that tries to solve problems for customers. It tries to solve financial problems for customers using the mutual fund platform. That's all it does. Uh, it's very easy to talk about any industry in its jargon, especially money management. God, it can sound so complicated. I mean, reality is no human wakes up today thinking, I'm going to buy a large cap fund. Do I buy an active fund or a passive fund? People wake up thinking, how am I going to buy that dream house? How am I going to send my child to a better school than I did? How am I going to plan for something else? Am I financially secure for my next generation? People have financial problems. Money is a tool to solve problems and live a better life. And that is what we help you do.
All right. How big is it?
How big is it? So we manage today 1.12 lakh crore, 1.1 lakh crores in assets under management. Sounds like a large number, but it is
Yeah,
one
beyond
point.
a certain point in time,
It just
it's the
sounds
law
like
of
large
large numbers, or
numbers.
large numbers are
That
large.
makes us either the 12th or 13th largest asset management company.
Yeah, that would have been my next question
Yeah.
because it helps you. So I understand there's about 40 odd
Yeah,
players in the man.
almost close to 50 odd players. This industry is expanded, um, managing a total of 45 lakh crores of assets. So that's where we are one. Uh, it is a very fragmented industry where there's not even the largest player will not be more than 12, 13, 14%. And At 1 lakh, which is 2.5% of the industry, you are still a very large player.
When you took over as CEO, Edelweiss was ranked 30 odd
Something like that, yeah.
and you're now at somewhere between 12,
12 and
and 13.
13, yes.
So you've managed to cover a lot of ground
Yes.
in a fairly competitive space. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Would it be fair to say that you operate in a sector where you're surrounded by giants?
Yes, you are. You are surrounded by giants. And when we entered the space, I think that was a bigger phenomena. So the narrative that I got told and others who started at that time was there's no hope for you in the business because the industry is consolidating. These words, the industry is consolidating, ring in my head from 16 and 2016 and 17. And if I can be frank, it's also an industry that's a little bit uh, that has a little bit of a caste system. So if you are large, you get all the exposure, you get all the media, you know all the distribution. Nobody really likes a small AMC CEO. This is something a distributor told to me in my first 3 months. It's like if you're a CEO of a small AMC, nobody wants to meet you, nobody likes you. Um, so that's what it was. I have to say, 6 years later, it has changed a little bit. More people are entering the industry. There's a lot more buzz and excitement about, oh, this one's going to start and that one's going to start.
What changed?
I would like to at least take a tad bit of credit for it. But a few years ago, a prominent publication wrote this article about how the fact is new players are making it in this industry. Um, there's someone like us who went from 6,000 to whatever, 6,000 crores to 1.1. And there are a couple of others, people who have found a way to appeal to the consumer, to solve a problem for the consumer, to perform, have scaled in size. And that perhaps has sent a signal to others that it's not too late to enter the industry because India is in her teenage years as an economy. I mean, mutual fund industry is so small in terms of its penetration. We are 16% mutual fund assets to GDP. The global average is now 80%. So there's so much space that it's not too late. And I think the success of small size, the so-called small AMC over the last few years and multiple ones, has perhaps given people a sense that this is a large opportunity and it's not too late to try and capture it. There's another interesting thing that Prashesh tells me, which is that it's important to be significant. But in a market like India, you do not have to be obsessed with being 7 or top 5. Even if you do a good job as top 10, 11, 12, and you're significant, the opportunity is so large that you will build a very meaningful business.
I want to ask you a question about the market. How do you, as Radhika, see the market differently than others? What is the market that you see before you in which you operate, which is different from how the rest of the world might see it?
So I see the market, one is very large. I'll tell you what is common and what is different. I see the market is very large. I see the market is expanding, and I know the reason I was desperate to enter this industry. I was desperate to become a mutual fund CEO sometime in 16, 17, and I had never been one before. But I was a mutual fund investor. I see this as a great consumer product. I think for the Indian consumer, there can be no simpler product. So this market has to grow because I believe anything for the consumer that is good for the consumer will find a way. And the Indian consumer is getting more aspirational. So that I think is the commonality. How do I see the market differently? I think there are lots of problems to be solved. So if you talk to a lot of my counterparts over the last 5, 6 years, they'll believe there's no product innovation possible in this market. I completely disagree. I think there's so much that you could do. I think.
Sorry, Radhika, allow me to rephrase my question.
Huh?
What I mean by how do you see the market differently is that, yes, there is one version. The traditional version is that you operate in the mutual fund market, right? But it's possible that there's another way to look at this market, which is really like you alluded to it earlier, that look, perhaps we are in the market where people are trying to buy a second home or like. So my question to you is that, is there a way that you see the overall market that you're operating in, which is very yes, it is mutual funds, but it's also something else.
Yeah,
Is
so
there something else?
I see us, as I said, I see us as someone who solves financial problems. And if you restrict your domain to being a mutual fund professional, even though the mutual fund is a platform to solve problems. It's a regulated platform to solve problems, but we're in the business of solving problems. I think one thing that does help our approach, because a consumer has a lot of financial products as choices. They can go do an FD. They can go buy Bitcoin. For the consumer, even though that's unregulated, by the way, that is also a financial product. So we are solving problems using mutual fund as a vehicle. I think that's the way. And in every product committee, we have this notion of a product committee where we approve new products. And I'm very passionate about products and product development. We ask ourselves this question: are we solving someone's problem or not? Because I can market anything and make it successful. But are we solving someone's problem or not? And I think that is perhaps what has helped us be a more innovative asset management company over the last 6 years. That tireless focus on solving problems.
I mean, you say that you're in the market of trying to solve consumers' problems. I have a question here. Do consumers see this as a problem, or do they see it as an opportunity? And I think the way people approach the two psychologically is very different, right? If I have a problem and I have to solve it, I'll tend to defer it. But if I see it's like greed versus like, is it like a vitamin, or is it like is it something that allows me to prevent a, something bad happening, or is it allows me something that lets growth happen? Which one is it? Is it a problem? Is it an opportunity?
No, so we are a growth asset class. Maybe the word is problem, maybe the word is goal. So we are in the investing is purposeful, right? Nobody sits and plays a contest. You made X rupees, I made this rupees, you made that return. When I say problems, I think we are here to fulfill consumer goals. That's what we are here to do. So I believe the best kind of investing is oriented towards goals. Otherwise, what you do, if you follow the mantra of greed driven investing, there is no limit to greed. And one of the challenges, by the way, I've had with the finance industry is that it is one of the greediest industries in the world. I mean, finance professionals on average are the most well paid professionals, and yet you have the maximum number of problems. The same is true of investing. There is no limit to greed. I meet so many consumers, so many distributors. I met a consumer who was perfectly happy that they were earning 14-15% returns compound. Very good. Suddenly they heard that small cap funds have given 30% returns. They got very agitated. That is greed driven investing.
Because then their 14-15% does not look that good enough when somebody else is making more than.
But the reality is, for their lifestyle, for their need, this person is a heart patient, is a single earner. They have to be conservative. For them, 14-15% is the right outcome. So for their problem, their goal, their circumstances, their purpose, that's the right. So greed scares me. Greed truly scares me in this business. And I'm also a child of 2008 because I saw that very early in my career.
Next up, we have Lalit Keshre of Groww, who started off in the same sector as Radhika did, but has since become a multi-product platform for people who will be rich in the future. So when you as Groww say or financial services, what do you imply by financial services?
See, there are only three things, right? One is, as I said, like when you start gathering things for future, that's like wealth. Wealth is accumulation for future. Second thing is you don't have wealth, so you get some extra leverage, you get cash for future. That is the credit, right? So if you're starting a business, so again, for future growth, you are taking credit. And the third one is to protect the future, which is insurance. So these are the three major things which kind of define financial services, in my opinion.
And are these three areas that Groww is strategically interested in as well?
So if you take today's snapshot, Groww is different. If you take 4 years back a snapshot, Groww was different.
And what was it? What was 4 years ago?
So 7 years. So we started 7.5 years back, and idea was to build this tech financial services company, which is not push based but pull based, where customers get what they deserve. Really, right? It's not kind of how today's how industry was at that time, right? So idea was to build this, but we thought, don't you can't do everything. If you want to build very very meaningful stuff, then you can't do everything in one shot. So you create like a multi-decade kind of plan, right? And you start with something, and mutual fund distribution was something that we started with. So first 4 years, Groww was looked at as a mutual fund distributor, which is how, if you look at again current snapshot, it would be looked at differently and so on, right?
So what is it now?
So right now it's kind of we have a bunch of things. If you look at the narrative right now outside, it's more like a stock investing platform. But then mutual fund is also very large. It's kind of taken like a shadow in terms of the world. But they're also like, we have a very large team working there. We have credit, we have AMC, we recently acquired, and so on. So story will play out like.
So, I mean, as the founder, how do you see what Groww is today? How would you describe what Groww is today versus 4 years ago? 4 years ago, you're saying a lot of people saw Groww largely as a mutual fund platform.
Yeah.
What do you think it is today?
So today, it is like it's like a multi-product platform, right? Where customers, there's a wealth is a very large component right now, and then other components are smaller, but a lot of focus on them as well. We are one of the most loved platforms in the country today, right? Most of the growth happens word of mouth, and we want to continue being like that. It's a very kind of well received brand by the customer, especially in tier 2, tier 3, right? Most of the customers come, so everything is DIY. We don't kind of we don't have like physical interfaces or anything, like, it's customers use the product, they tell about it to their friends and so on. And yeah.
And what about, let's say, 5 years later, 7 years later? Because you said earlier that you will be something different.
Yeah.
In the
5-7 years later, we will have a lot more services for the customers, right? So our vision is like, when it comes to financial services, our customers should get the best what they deserve, and then we provide them everything for that target customer, right?
Got it. One of the things you also say, again, like in context with Roti Kapda Makan or financial services, and I think you've said this multiple times, is that Groww's mission is to democratize financial services.
Yes.
When you say that, are you referring largely to access? When you say democratize, in what sense do you imply the word democratize?
Yeah, so access is, of course, one of the most important thing, because India needs access today. If you look at the penetration, and that's also a leverage for companies like Groww to kind of continue growing, right? Access is a very large kind of, especially again, we are always speaking in context of India, right? So access is the most important thing, but it also is also delight, and it's also about transparency and everything, right? So today we are sitting in like a very prime area of Bangalore, right? And the kind of financial services people get here is very different from, let's say, somebody in tier 2, tier 3 city, or we actually live in a bubble here in Bangalore, right? So
I have heard that multiple times about the Bangalore bubble.
Yeah. So that's what democratization means, right? I mean, different products for different people, but accessible to everybody.
Good. Now, if I reconcile what we've just discussed, right, like, that your ultimate aim is to essentially offer as many of the financial products to as many customers as possible in a transparent manner, in a way that is trustworthy, etc. Now, this is your ambition and goal. Now, on the other hand, now if you step back and look at the financial services market, there are banks, there are insurance companies, there are other platforms, etc. Right? So now, it stands to reason that as a customer, you will have to make a choice some point about who do you go with. So what is your thesis on how this plays out? Because everybody at the end of the day wants to do lending. Everybody wants to distribute insurance. Everybody wants to distribute mutual funds. Everybody wants to become a stockbroking. If I remember correctly, PhonePe has also launched stockbroking services, etc. And I'm sure many will, right? So it looks like everybody is converging to all of the spaces and opportunities. So when this happens from the supply side, What happens on the demand side? What happens on the consumer side?
So it is not necessarily bad.
No, I'm
So
not saying it's bad. I'm saying how
right,
does it play out?
So the kind of opportunity size that we have in India, I think it's going to be win-win for everybody. And if you look at nuances, right? So on the top, it would look like everybody going towards everything and so on. But then there are well-defined segments for everybody, right? And there would be, of course, there would be like, as you grow bigger and bigger, you kind of start stepping into other territories and so on. But I think the runway is like very, very huge, right? And as I said, like for our customer segment is very well defined, right? As I said, like DIY, mostly like will get rich in the future, but are not like, they are like young, who want control, who want to take control of their own kind of lives, who don't want to visit to some branches and so on. So that's kind of different segment, right? And there are people who are focusing on other different kind of segments and so on.
Before I move on from Groww, I mean, if I were to ask you once again, actually, let me switch that question, right? You're many things today. And one of the things that you keep talking about is the customer love for Groww as a platform and your clarity on who your customer segment is. Could you give us a sense of what is a typical user's, let's say when somebody discovers Groww and when they sign up, what do they do? I mean, you said they're largely in tier 2, tier 3 cities. Could you give us a sense of a real kind of example of someone who discovers Groww, joins Groww? What do they do?
Yeah. No, so just now we met Rohit, right? And
yes, that's right. Like we are at Studio Sugarline and like,
so tier 2, tier 3, because the base is very large in tier 2, tier 3, but tier 1 also there are a lot of customers. So typically, see, what's the customer journey like? So your friend is kind of maybe investing and, into mutual funds or stocks. And then they would kind of tell you, Rohin, why don't you try this? Like, or you are looking for invest, you have high intent and you are asking around, what should I do? I don't know. And then you will get an answer, okay, download Groww, and then you can start using it and so on. So there's a very delightful journey we have tried to kind of, that's most of the time what we do, right? Basically.
And like, we've all heard of this thing of like, the initial moment of magic or truth when somebody, like, let's say Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Like, when you friend people, that's when.
Yeah.
So when somebody downloads the Groww app and signs in and stuff like that, what are some of the first things that they end up doing that, delight them?
So there are typically, see, Groww is more like right now so people come here to invest, right? To do a transaction basically, right? And that's what customers' intent is. Now, what we have done is, from customers' intent to fulfilling that intent, what are the barriers? Remove all those barriers. What are the anxiety factors? Remove that anxiety. Where can you provide delight to customer in that journey?
Could I ask you for examples, like, the barriers or anxiety?
Yeah, so some of them are
cetera?
secrets as well, but like,
Sure.
try onboarding on Groww, and it would be fastest. And there are very, very small things where you get stuck and so on, we help there and so on, right? And then discovery of everything, right? You can search anything, any product on Groww, and then you can buy. Transaction is very, very kind of seamless and so on. So it's like a journey is made of many, many small things, and you focus on every single small thing to kind of make it very, very seamless for the customer. So that's and then that kind of emerge out as a overall customer delight.
Good. Talking about markets, you said like it's the DIY segment, it's the young folks who tomorrow will become investors or larger investors, so to speak, right? And one of the debates that's been running in India for the last maybe 12 months.
They are already larger investors, but they'll become very, very wealthy because they are with Groww.
and they'll stay invested, right? And compounding and all of that.
Next on the list of guests is another person who shares the stage with Radhika on Shark Tank, Ritesh Agarwal of OYO Rooms.
From the time that you started OYO to what it is today, I mean, it wasn't even called OYO back when you started it, right? You've gone through multiple pivots
What the organization's name has changed, what the organization represents has changed, the scale of the organization changed. What is OYO today, and what was it when it started out?
So thank you for having me here, Rohin. I was, of course, looking forward to this chat, but my intrigue increased because I had read a bunch of newsletters, but I used the opportunity because I was coming here to finish up reading some newsletters that I had missed earlier. And it's just fascinating. Every time you read one of them, you feel like it just allows you to think in a different tangent, which sometimes you may be trying to do on a daily basis, or sometimes it may be absolutely new. So I'm looking forward to this chat so that I've always learned
Ditto.
that.
I mean, likewise. I mean, we've been trying to schedule this for a while. I'm glad that we finally got to meet.
Yes, because look, I think entrepreneurs more often than not, it's said that they may not be they may not need to be told the answers. They may just need to be asked the right questions, and probably the answer lays with
That's a
themselves.
wonderful thing. I'm going to add it to my repertoire of idioms or sayings because that's fascinating.
So you'll see this with yourself as well, right? Like a lot of times you may have an answer about how you would like to make decisions. Only when you're asked the hard questions, you end up thinking, well, this may be the solution to it and may replicate. At least that's what has happened to me.
Do you collect questions? Because do you collect great questions? Because, I mean, just continuing from what you have said, one of the things I've observed is that it's not about great answers. It's about great questions that unlock great
those
answers.
Yes. And I think as an entrepreneur, you have to be good in answering, but you have to be even better in asking questions, both to yourself and people around you. And I try to collect good questions. So I'll tell you one of the questions that I think in this, I will use this in this context of what I was explaining, which is where OYO started and where it is today. So I started OYO when I was right out of my high school. So I finished my 12th grade. I always had this thing of trying new things. I was naive enough to think that after a few internships during high school, I was ready to build a company of my own. I say naive because if I knew how hard it is, I probably wouldn't have done it. But at that point of time, you read TechCrunch. Ken wasn't around then, but if Ken was around, I could say that, by reading Ken, TechCrunch, you feel like it's so easy. You feel like, well, if everybody else is doing it, maybe I can as well. So I thought that I should start a company of my own. Same time.
Sorry, Ritesh. Why do you say today, with the benefit of hindsight, that you wouldn't do it?
I wouldn't do it at that time because the first few years were so hard, Rohin. I think you have to, the 0 to 1 of really starting a company, a lot of people underappreciate the absolute small problems that come by, especially when you are of the background and knowledge that you have, right? So you're going into the hospitality industry, which is an industry which has long had people who have been professionals for decades in the industry and starting new businesses. The participants in the industry, which is either the hotel or property owners, would appreciate somebody with knowledge of the industry. And similarly for customers, what they would like could be absolutely new depending on the city or the location or their backgrounds of customers. And even the very basic thing like that of setting up a company, opening a bank account, convincing somebody to take a meeting from you. A lot of these are people take for granted when you're starting a company. But the first 2 or 3 years, frankly, you have no time to build a business. You're almost always trying to fix the basics, which I'm sure, to some extent you may have noticed when you were starting your own business.
Isn't it, I mean, just sticking with that point, isn't it in some ways easier when you're young, hopeful, with nothing to lose, and you can kind of throw yourself at the problem? Because the older you get, the more, I think, dependency, self-consciousness, all you have. Like you said, something as simple as getting a meeting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
A young you would be, I got to do it.
You're okay to take rejections.
Absolutely, right? Like, if you were, let's say, 25 or 30, your ego comes in,
Yes.
your education, your status, and then you're like, this person didn't respond to me. I'm not going to So in some ways...
I think first off, I have zero regrets. I'm actually very happy that I started when I did. But I'm also thankful that I was not so well versed with how hard it is. because at that point of time, if I knew how hard it was, I would have thought that should I pursue something as hard as this now? But in reflection, I feel it was the absolutely right choice of pursuing entrepreneurship back then, because age was on my side. I was able to learn. My worldviews were not informed by any baggage I had before me. My worldviews are truly, I'm not trying to plug in, first principles oriented.
No, not at all. You were an
Because
outsider as well.
I
You
was
had
an
no.
absolute outsider, both to entrepreneurship and to, I'll tell you this. So I used to go to, every entrepreneur who would be listening to me would have gone to a startup weekend, startup Saturday as used to be called. All of these various startup events, I used to show up as well. And even there, I used to be the
Hoping
outsider.
to find a co-founder.
Hoping to find a co-founder, a business operator, somebody who would work with me, an engineer, at the very least, get free food, because as you may remember, you don't get charged to go to a startup Saturday and you get free food. And I'm very thankful for that. But more often than not, I think even there I used to be an outsider, because everybody in there was coming from an engineering background or a business background. So they had something to talk about. I was a high school kid who nobody knew. So I have learned that showing up every day is a very critical part of success, right? I think first month people saw and they said, well, maybe he has this new excitement for entrepreneurship. Maybe it's the first month he's trying it. Second month, people said, well, let's see how many times he shows up. But in the 12th month, people felt that this kid is not going away. He's going to be around. So might as well figure out some way of engaging. And I think the second year, people thought that, well, now he has a business going. Small business, but something. Third year, it became he's had to pivot, but already he's pivoted and got 20 hotels. So something. So I think every year, somebody who sees you in the journey, their appreciation for your work grows and your ability to convince people around you also sort of improves. But anyway, switching back to starting the company. So started OYO in 2013, June. The money that helped me start OYO was a Thiel fellowship. So Peter Thiel is founder of PayPal, early investor in Facebook. Coming to questions collection, one of the questions he asked me, so there's a set of questions you have to answer for the fellowship. A couple of questions that I've sort of kept close to me, a treasure of questions as we were discussing earlier. One is, if you had infinite capital, what would you have done? And the other, what is the one thing that you believe in that nobody else around you believes in? In my view, questions like these are actually not one time in life, right? These are questions that you should be asking yourself probably almost every year. So I think I'm lucky that I became one of the earliest Indian residents to be a Thiel fellow. It was my first overseas flight, first time I used a passport. I went
By the way,
from,
what was the answer to that question? What do you believe in that nobody else believes in?
I think at that point of time, by the way, I ask this question to myself every time I'm trying to sort of launch a new BU, a new product or something, that what is the one thing I believe in that others don't believe in. But at that point of time, I think I'm trying to recollect. But as far as I remember, it was about, I want to do something big in the travel and hotel industry. And people believe that having your hands dirty for 10 to 15 years in this industry will help. A lot of people have advised me that I should go work in hotels for some time before I get to doing this. And I believe that if I worked in hotels, I would get biased towards the way of operating that exists today. And hence, I believe somebody young who's coming from no background will end up creating a much bigger impact. At least that's what I remember as the answers. But it's a good point. I will go and check out my application. There's a very interesting thing they do. After they make you a fellow, they make you write a letter to a 3-year older self of yourself. That 3 years later, you will get this letter back and you can open it and you will read for yourself what you thought you will be 3 years later and what you really are. And you write a letter effectively to a 3-year older self of yourself. So I have that also. So I'll try and open it. It's a good reminder for that. But, for me, I truly resonate with the first line that our contract started with. It started with saying, we never let university interfere with education. which is, if you go a little bit deeper, I think education
This is the Thiel Foundation's.
is the Thiel
got it.
Foundation's. I think it's spoken by a very famous. It's written by a very famous author. How could I miss this?
We'll come back to
I'll
it.
come back to it. But I think, I really resonated with that. It was a transformational experience because I think traveling in some way gets you a much broader exposure. I learned so much being around people who were thinking big. So I used to be at the Hacker House where Dylan Field of Figma would come and pitch saying that, well, I'm trying to build this new online thing because a software, an installed software, a native software for building product designs is too hard, and hence Figma will solve it. I think seeing a lot of that at that point of time allowed me to reflect and say that, well, everybody around me is thinking big, so maybe so should I. Last 10 years, today OYO is a leading global hotel brand. We serve close to 16,000 small to mid-sized hotels as their exclusive distributor and their brand. And on the other hand, we serve around 80,000 holiday homes. We do this in 35 countries around the world. And of course, we've gone through our highs and lows. We've had some exceptional highs when you're growing at a speed like never before. It was followed with COVID, which was one of the toughest times for anybody in the travel and hospitality industry, let alone somebody or a company which was growing so rapidly, which means that you had forward invested to some extent. But I think finally it feels like it's time for the green shoots. So we've gone through our highs and lows, and I feel like every day is a new learning.
So, to come back to my original question, how would you describe what OYO is today?
I would describe OYO as, most people who'd be listening, they would have seen OYO as a consumer brand. That is, we provide a clean, comfortable room at a price point that is affordable and value-oriented to customers, which is to significant extent correct. But that said, what a lot of people don't appreciate is we ourselves see of us as beyond a consumer brand, a problem solver for the small hotel owner. Because if you think about an individual small business owner who's running a hotel, 70% of the hotels that join us have had zero online revenue before OYO came by, which means that they had no footprint. The first time they get any digital footprint is us. We put them on, of course, the OYO platform, but multiple others. For the first time, they recognize the value of content. Even though in hotels, you're more or less reserving often by using pictures, reviews, and ratings, right? For them, for the first time, they're able to look at being able to have a ledger, which can tell them what number of rooms are available, what are not available. For the first time, they see dynamic pricing. A lot of our hotel owners have told me that they've had flat pricing for probably 10 years. And for the first time, the 20 rooms that exist, almost every room sold at a different price, which is truly the concept of supply and demand that should exist. So in our view, at least in my view, I feel like we, of course, are a consumer brand which likes to provide affordable, clean, comfortable, right-priced, right location experiences. But bigger than that, I feel like if you're a small hotel or a holiday home owner, depending on the geography where we are serving, we can be the biggest enabler for you to not only grow your business, but also to be able to sort of operate your property much more efficiently than you would have done it earlier.
So, if I may understand that correctly, what you're saying is from the outside, people view OYO largely as a demand-driven company. But from the inside, how the organization is run and how you see it, you're fundamentally a supply-driven company in the sense that your job is to attract and satisfy and retain the hotel owners who provide the rooms on your platform, and everything else is in order to serve them.
Absolutely well put. And I will go a little bit deeper in this. I and our management have a fundamental view, which is India is a supply constrained market, not a demand constrained market. If you can get a 1,500 rupee clean quality room at a good location, it will sell. You don't need to market it anymore because there is dearth of great quality supply in some form or the other, right? So I think, for example, imagine this studio, right? So if they get this studio, location is of course right. If they get it at the right price point, of course the quality is
Just for context, we're sitting at Spacebot Studios in Indiranagar, in a
absolutely
prime Indiranagar
and
location.
Indiranagar is beautiful. I just came by from one of our hotel nearby. It's amazing the amount of trees that are in Bangalore. I'm always like fascinated with it. But anyway, coming back, if they get the pricing right, I think this place is going to be sold out all the time because there are not so many good quality studios at the right location at the right price point available. And this is true for example, airlines. Indigo has never had to market itself a lot, but it's the right price point, at least earlier. Nowadays, it's quite expensive. But well, that's supply demand. They've created enough capacity. As many times they create supply, demand follows them. So that's our fundamental thesis, that supply drives demand, and hence focus on great quality hotels at the right location, right price will create a long-term franchise is our, at least my view.
Fourth on the list is Karthik Jayaraman of WayCool Foods and Products, who started up at arguably the best stage, at least statistically speaking, in a sector which was not exactly his area of expertise, so to speak.
Thank you, Karthik. I wanted to get to discussing WayCool, and I downloaded some information from your site. I'm going to read it out. As the only full stack tech-led supply chain player in India, we focus on food cultivation, processing, and distribution, leveraging innovative technology to scale and operate a complex supply chain from fork to farm. This is a mouthful. Can I ask you, what does WayCool do? What is WayCool?
It is a mouthful. So let me keep it very simple. We are a supply chain company. At our heart, that's what we do. And we believe that with better planning, a supply chain can be both efficient and responsive. Right? What we learn in supply chain science is that you either are responding to your customers' needs very aggressively at the cost of inventory, wastage, and operating cost, or you're very efficient in all of those, but you may not be the most responsive to the customer's need. This is called the efficiency frontier in supply chain science.
Can you give me an example of how this works?
To give you an example, if you see if you see a startup, for example, any modern startup, they prioritize consumer well-being and consumer delight over operating cost in the initial stage. So you have a lot of inventory, you have a lot of
SKUs, lots of products. Even if they get wasted, it's fine.
Even if they get wasted, it's fine, and you have a lot of delivery costs associated with it. So you're very responsive, but not necessarily the most efficient. On the other hand, you had, if you went back to the 70s.
So in many ways, if I were to say, that's optimizing for the front end.
Optimizing for the front end. The other is optimizing for operations. You had to book a car and it would come when it would come in the earlier days, because the production line was optimizing. I will do all LX models, VX models, etc. And then, your car gets allocated in 6 weeks or 8 weeks and so on. That was optimized more on efficiency. It worked over there because the customer was by then, at that point in time, used to not having the responsiveness.
Got it. You buy what we are able to manufacture and sell.
That's correct.
We don't necessarily offer you what you may want. Got it. Optimizing for the back end.
Correct. So the trade-off is, different companies operate at different points. If you're a natural monopoly, if you're in a stable market, it's not growing, you'll operate to the left typically. On the other hand, if you're trying to establish yourself, you're competing aggressively, you'll focus more on responsiveness. But there is a natural frontier on this. What helps push the frontier out is essentially technology, but more than technology is the business process behind the technology. Technology is the tool that helps you deploy a revised way of thinking. So in our case, that's really what we're attempting to do. See, we connect the farmer's output with or without processing to a retailer. That's essentially the pipe that we are operating. Now, I can buy from the farmer and somehow sell it to the retailer, in which case I'm stuck with a product that's dying every minute and therefore losing value every minute. On the other hand, if I can anticipate what the retailer wants and buy according to what the retailer wants, then I can actually avoid that inventory sitting on my books and perishing all the time. And I can continually make this faster and faster and faster, so that my velocity throughput through my fixed assets, which are my warehouses, etc., goes up, and scale goes up through my various assets that I'm operating, and therefore again operating efficiency. Now what this requires is our ability to predict what the retailer will order.
So, I mean, before we move on to that, what kind of products, commodities? You said you're a supply chain company.
That's correct.
You said you're farm to fork.
That's correct.
Within that, are there areas, are there like, commodities, areas, product categories that you operate in and that you don't?
Yes, there are. For example, we deal with fresh produce, grains and staples, and milk. These are the only three categories that we operate in. We don't operate in meats because we realize that there is no synergy in the supply chain. Your source is different. Your warehouses per se have to be different because you have cross-contamination risk. And the customer is also different because the customers that, other than a few modern retailers, meat shops are dedicated meat shops. And so we said we will not get into that space. Even within these categories, we operate at different levels of depth for different commodities. For vegetables, I go all the way to the farmer. I have my own collection centers. For fruit, for domestic fruit, we're progressively building capability to go to the farmer. So we're very good in apple and citrus. We're starting to get there on pomegranate and to some extent banana. We're able to do the Tamil Nadu bananas directly
sourced from
the
farmers.
That's correct.
Otherwise, I'm assuming that you're sourcing from some
an
kind of an
intermediary.
aggregator.
So
Okay,
it could be a farmer producer organization, or it could be an aggregator,
got it.
or it could be a trader. So, or it could be from the local mandi in your city. So those are the various levels. Today in vegetables, only scale determines where I buy from the farm, because I need a minimum scale to buy a farmer versus where I buy from the mandi. So I think about 40 SKUs now we are able to procure regularly from the collection centers. There are another 20-25 SKUs that we'll buy from the mandi, but they are very small quantities. In case of grains, we're very good in lentils. Lentils are peculiar in India because it's partially grown within the country and partially imported. So you need a supply chain that's capable of handling both. So we do import. We don't import from growers, we import from traders, but the domestic market, we buy from FPOs as well as individual farmers. We have collection centers in Maharashtra and northern Karnataka from where we procure. And what we procure, we process up to different stages. So we have, in fact, for lentils, I have my own mill in southern Tamil Nadu. So we process the lentils over there, and as well as other co-packers. We sell it in bulk, we sell it in white label, and we sell it in our own brands. All three we do because I get the scale economies of buying by doing that.
And then there's milk as well, you said.
Milk is again 35% direct farm procurement and 65% from aggregators, other startups and aggregators who are into milk aggregation. The only thing that's limiting me over there is I need to put in some capex, and right now I'm sort of going slow on the capex. So we need to set up bulk milk chillers, rapid milk coolers, as well as milk collection points. So I have about 30 milk collection points and 2 BMCs right now. I need to set up 9 more BMCs and about 100 and odd milk collection points.
Good. Thank you for that, Karthik. One of the things that you've said in the past is that India's agro industry, to which you belong, is largely push-based, but WayCool was designed to be pull-based.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So today, if you are a retailer, the way you decide what to buy is by looking at your stock at the end of the day, using your judgment on what tomorrow is going to be like, and deciding therefore how many quantities of what I will buy. You either go to the mandi, or nowadays, because there are a plethora of options like us, you open up different apps or call up different people and say, I need so many kgs. The challenge is that that product has already been harvested the day before. And I don't have the intrinsic efficiency of a market. A market is a natural liquidation point which will always be more efficient at scale because it has the scale and it sells all kind of vegetables. The only other option for an organized player like me is to be able to predict what you will order a day in advance, and sometimes much more in advance depending upon the harvest distance and so on. So within this we have storable and non-storable commodities. You take the greens as well as the what we call as the 6 C's, carrot, cabbage, cauliflower, etc., as well as the native Indian vegetables. These are not storable. It is best if you move them as fast as possible from the farm gate to the retail point. Here's where we focused on improving our ability to forecast our own demand. Now, for example, we started off with a simple, 12-week time series saying 12 Mondays will determine this Monday's demand. Then we learned that, hey, it's not that simple. If there is a long weekend, the behavior changes drastically. If there's a festival, the behavior changes drastically. Over time, we were initially learning this manually, but now we have a data science team that is actually using AI and other tools to continually learn and improve the forecasting accuracy. So today we have reached 83% forecasting accuracy on these 25 SKUs that are highly sensitive that I'm buying from.
What does when you say 83% forecasting efficiency, what does that mean?
So I will be plus minus, the worst I can get to is 83 minus 3 sigma, which will be about, say, 70%. The best I can get to is about 95%. So that is what we mean by forecasting accuracy. And now the team is monitoring the sigma. How much is that deviation in this? And with more data, the more insights, it gets more and more accurate. And more consistent buying from my customers, it gets more and more accurate.
So when you say that you're designing yourself to be pull-based, what you're really saying is that we are trying to build a better forecasting model.
Exactly.
Rather than trying to push what we have already acquired to the market because it's a perishable commodity and we need to get it.
That's correct.
Okay.
So this is part one of what we do. Part two is, based on this forecast, how do I buy? You typically buy closer to the lower limit of your forecast and then top up from the market so that you are able to have just the right amount of stock.
So that you're not stuck with.
So that you're not stuck with stock. We're getting better and better at it now, and that's what's keeping our waste low in this.
Right. Is it true that you're named WayCool because you and your co-founder Sanjay had originally hypothesized that cold chains will solve the supply chain problem, but subsequently you realized, no, not really, but the name stuck?
Yes, that's absolutely true. We actually looked at this segment. The way we got into this itself was interesting, right? We started off, I'm an automotive guy who was selling commercial vehicles for a living earlier. Logistics was my customer and cold logistics had taken off. So when we double clicked into what the cold logistics folks were doing, we realized that they went to pharmaceuticals and various kinds of food. And that's when you were getting a lot of reports saying cold storage is the solution to India's problems and so on. And therefore we said maybe we should deep dive into this. And we said let's understand this. So it was called Project WayCool. And when we got into it, we realized that there was a lot we had to unlearn and a lot of reports that we had to forget. I think that Indians are intrinsically more efficient, and therefore we figured out quite some time back that it is better for me to harvest and consume the same day and move material as fast as possible rather than put it in a cold store, then maintain it all along and take it out. Secondly, the challenge in cold storage is that unless the entire chain is operating at the same temperature, the product dies even faster. It suffers a thermal shock and then it actually dies much faster.
That's true, because sometimes you can see that, like, in stores, if the electricity goes off for a while and if the fruit or the produce has not, you can make out when it's lost that refrigeration for 6 hours or so, suddenly its character just changes.
It changes,
like
exactly. So, and thirdly, all of these solutions are temperate country solutions. 45 degrees Celsius in Hyderabad, and I'm moving it from somewhere in the north where it's passing through even hotter temperatures. The sheer inefficiency of it was appalling. So we said that, we should treat this as a
for the
supply
energy
chain.
cost.
The energy cost, exactly.
The differential to maintain it at a lower,
Exactly. So our view was that we should look at this as a supply chain problem and not as a cold chain problem. Cold chain is the hammer, and so everything looks like a nail. That's not the right way to do it, right? What are you solving for, and what is the right tool for that problem?
How long did it take you and Sanjay to arrive at this understanding that, look, it's not just about cold chains?
It was 6 to 7 months. It was high time work, right? Weekends we used to go understand how this works. And the market educated us. They said, if market was very straightforward. Right? They said, boss, we've been in this business for centuries, if not millennia. If that were a solution, we would have implemented it. No, we didn't. So it doesn't work for us.
Karthik, you say something very important, right? Like, and so sometimes what you say is true. Like, so when you're looking at something new and disruptive that hasn't tried before, or perhaps has been tried before and failed, you're faced with this, look, if this had to work, somebody would have already done it, right? At the same time, there are numerous examples in India and outside of someone still decided to do it and it succeeded.
Yes.
So how do you differentiate between, as a leader and as a CEO, between when someone says that, look, if this had to happen, it would have happened. That's not always true. Versus in some cases, you're right. Like, there is a reason why it's like that. So how do you tend to kind of interrogate those confusing decision points?
I think I personally use two sets of insights, one of which I'm good at and the other one I'm trying to learn. One is there a better toolkit available? That will answer whether it is technically feasible to do something which was not feasible 10 years ago. The second is your consumer evolving to a point where your consumer will accept your solution, which is something that I'm learning now. And that's one of the reasons why I'm in so many field visits as well. And the consumer has positively surprised me this time. They may negatively surprise me the next time. My view is that changing consumer behavior is too expensive and fraught with limited probabilities of success. But if you know that, 2 years hence the consumer will be at this point, so let me start preparing the ground, then I believe you will arrive at which is workable and which is not workable.
Is there an example at WayCool where something is taking off now and you started the groundwork for that 2 years ago?
Branded staples. I think branded staples was something where I faced a lot of pushback early as well.
From your team?
From external stakeholders, from my team, even from some industry.
What was the pushback? There's already so much of it in India.
अरे भारत में सब लोग बैग काट के लूस में बेचते हैं.
हाँ.
That was the thesis.
That's one end of the spectrum. At the other end, there's already a lot of branded staples from the big brands, etc. in stores, right?
Which aren't necessarily doing their best, right? I mean, you have a lot of big FMCG companies. I think Ashirwad has broken through. But quite a few brands aren't really doing their best. You find Sons of the Soil, local packers, as well as regional players who are doing better than any of these. And they're, there's a difference between a label and a brand. These guys are labelers and not so much as branders. So that was the pushback that we were receiving consistently. I saw 3 or 4 things change in the market. And frankly, I discovered this from the market itself, right? When we were sending our first bags of rice to retailers, we were basically sending it unbranded. And the miller used to pack it in whatever he had at that time. So the color of the bag changed. And suddenly the sales return started increasing from retailers. So we were trying to figure out what's going on, and we went and spoke to the retailers. They said, nahi, wo orange bag hi chahiye mere ko. That customer liked that product. This is some other product you have given me. And that is when we said that, okay, maybe the customer is looking at the orange bag as a proxy for the brand. That was one observation that we had. The second is, the sales people will always come back at you and say your price is too high. So we said, let's go to the Arisi Mandi, which is the typical rice shop, and understand what kind of, buying behavior is there from the consumer over there. We observed a few things. See, there are some Sons of the Soil brands which have become big in every geography. There's one brand in Andhra. I don't want to name them specifically.
Sure.
There's one brand which is very popular in parts of Chennai. One which is very popular in coastal Andhra. These are all, labels that have become brands. And that gave me the second insight that, the consumer is using that handle as a, cross-check for quality consistency. The third insight that we got was that she was not buying the cheapest product. She had her own views on each product category, and we found a lot of people buying the second or third most expensive rice. It seemed to us that the most expensive rice was, biting your hand a bit, and the cheapest one was seen as a proxy for poor quality. So they were choosing all the intermediary layers. So that said, okay, not only is there a brand as a source of comfort on product consistency, but also maybe the consumer is looking at it as a proxy for quality, and they have different expectations on quality. That is really when we said we'll test it out. So the consumer behavior seemed to be gravitating. The second thing that we observed was that, there are a lot of regional brands that had come up in specific categories like oil and dal. There are brands like Udayam which have been around for a long time in dal. Brands like Gold Winner in oil. So oil and dal are again commodities similar to rice and products like that. So why can't we brand it? The third insight was when we looked at the north, where Basmati in the last 20 years has been completely branded. So he said, when Basmati can be branded, why can't non-Basmati be branded? So these were a few triggers that things were changing on the
And
customer
overall, it's an inexorable trend, right? The premiumization
Yes.
of, I think, things that were unbranded or commoditized is like, it happens at its own pace, but it's virtually, I don't think in every single category it happens.
It happens. But the challenge there, Rohan, was that I was fighting the tide when there were a large number of folks coming in and discounting to get into the retail outlet. The large number of big platforms, etc., that were coming in and using pricing as a way of gaining traction in the market. We had the cash and carry guys, we had the online players, etc., coming in. So this was not a popular opinion at that point in time. But our instinct told us that this will work, and it has taken off handsomely. Today, there are many other companies coming in and starting to brand this category. So we have now started to move on to the next thing in premiumization and so on. But
And lastly, we have Neeraj Singh of Spinny, who, like Radhika and Lalit, is also competing in a market with lots of players and making waves despite being a late entrant into the market.
So, before the conversation early today, I went to Google and I searched used cars.
Okay.
The links that I got were Carwale, Cars Dekho, Cars 24, Car Trade, Droom, Maruti Suzuki True Value, Spinny, Mahindra First Choice, Quicker, Toyota Used Cars, Hyundai Used Cars, and I could go on.
Yeah.
This is a crowded, overfunded, overserviced, old, because many of these players have existed for a while, especially Mahindra First Choice, etc. And it's a brutal market. What made you enter it in 2015? What did you see that you felt nobody else was seeing?
My personal life journey and the way I have seen Indian society played a very important role in my decision behind starting up Spinny, doing something in this category. So, I come from a very small town in Jharkhand. The name of the town is Daltonganj. Born, brought up there, studied there till class 10th in a Hindi medium school. Then I went to Ranchi for my +1, +2, and from there only I prepared for IIT entrance. Then, of course, I stayed 1 year in Roorkee. Then came to Delhi to join IIT. And my first startup, which was in education. So we will talk more about that. But in that startup, I used to meet lots of parents, right? Every day I would meet.
This was the education startup.
Education startup, my first startup. So I used to meet like lots of parents every day, right? 30, 40 parents every day. And because of that kind of exposure, right? The way I could, understand Indian society and they relate to the Indian society, right? So that kind of became
Why is that? Why is meeting parents in the context of education
for
what did it teach
for
you?
any parent, right? When the kid goes to +11, they believe that is the most important, point in their entire entire educational journey, and that is going to be the defining moment what they are going to do in the life, what their career will be. So kind of inflection point for all the kids when they enter +1, +2, and with that kind of realization, right? I would say as a parent, that is the most vulnerable time, right? The way they are concerned, and out of that vulnerability and concern, if they are trusting somebody with their kids' career, they open up with you like anything. They will bond with you like anything. And in that phase, I was able to meet people from such a varied background. For example, I have to give you example of defense, right? So I was interacting with even the people who were riflemen, at the same time people who were just 1 or 2 level below air chief marshal. So and that applies to all domains of the society. So the kind of vast exposure,
All united by the fact that they were all equally concerned
About
their
their
children's.
education and career. Yeah.
What does that have to do with entering a crowded used
So
car market?
it's about people and their aspirations. So whatever my life journey is, like most of the people in India either aspire to be on a similar trajectory, or they are able to get on that kind of trajectory. What is like you know uh, like a typical a typical like case would be, you will come from a very small town. You know that education is the only way to
It's a stepping stone to a
stepping
better
stone,
future.
right? Better future, better life, and not just earning in many ways, better life in many ways, but yeah. So, and all kind of securities. So you try to study very hard so that you are able to go to a good college. Then you are able to start with a good job. When you start earning, right? So then you start thinking about buying a car, because since your childhood, many people are dreaming about that when they grow, then when they start earning, they will buy a car from themselves. So when you start earning, the first major purchase you plan is like buying a car. That is the of reality for most of the Indians, right? And especially the people who come from smaller places, right? So the way the car is perceived in Indian society is still very different from developed and modern world. So car is still like very aspirational, emotional purchase for people. So and it is like one of the most one of the 3-4 key purchases you do in your life. So I was able to see that that is the typical life journey for most of the people. And when you start earning, you think that you will buy your own car, and then when you start doing better in your career, you start doing better professionally, then you buy a better car, then you get married, then you buy a house. So buying your first car is like one of those 3-4
Milestones. I
miles
get it.
key-
You're
key-
saying for parents, class 11 is like a major milestone.
Yeah.
And those kids, once they get a job, the first car is their first probably major milestone.
Yeah.
I get this. But still, I come back to my original question. I buy this, but the market is still crowded, overfunded. Why did you
I'll
think
just go there, but before that, let me complete what I was saying. So, buying your car is not just ticking that particular checkbox, right? In a way, it is a kind of stepping stone for you. It in a way it works as a certain kind of unlock for you. That okay, I did this. Now I can start planning about bigger things. So it kinds of rebuilds or builds your confidence, right? So it is a unlock, right? It's definitely an unlock. So I perceive it that way. So because of the way I understand society, I am able to, or I was able to understand the importance of this particular purchase and speciality around this particular purchase, right? It is a very special, very emotional, aspirational. So
Yeah.
when I failed in my first 2 startups, so and when I was contemplating about the third startup, I was very clear that this time, right, I can't afford to keep doing flip-flops. So whatever I do next, I have to do for a long term. Whatever amount of effort, whatever amount of time it takes, I'm ready to commit that. But it should be a long term thing, right? I'll operate for maybe 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, maybe rest of the whole life. But whatever I build, right, that should be for decades. And if you want to build something for decades, then you have to solve a very, very like major problem statement in the society, right? Something which is like very important for people. By doing good to have things, by building good to have products or services, you can't build something for decades, right? And if you build anything good to have, then it requires certain massive inorganic push, and the moment you pull the inorganic push, right, everything crashes. So you have to solve something which is really, really important for people, which is like
I buy that.
Right.
I'll rephrase my question.
crowded.
You explained to me from the demand side, right? You're saying there is a fundament, there is an unlock, there is aspirations. It is going to be a ongoing large market. That's a demand side.
Yeah.
But on the supply side, there are lots of players already trying to service that market. So when you started as a third time entrepreneur, and when you looked at the supply side and there are all these players, right? What did you see? Where did you see Spinny coming in?
So this market in India behaves very differently than other categories. Whenever you have to set up a marketplace or any kind of platform, it is kind of established norm that you solve for supply first, and then automatically demand will
Correct.
happen.
If you were to
right?
use the example of Uber, for instance, when it started,
Yeah.
first came the supply, I mean, to large
Exactly,
extent, and then
exactly.
came the demand you
But
generate.
this category, behaves very differently. So in India, in used car market, right, there are various channels, but for 99% cases, the original source is individual seller, right? There are no structured large supply platforms, right? So market is structured very differently, and for any for any, like the kind of template we talk about, when we say you need to solve for supply first, what you actually mean is that you need to solve for supplier first. You bring the supplier to the platform, provide some incentives, and keep the supplier locked, with the platform. And with the time, demand traction will start picking up. And when there is a certain kind of equilibrium, you pull the supply side incentive. So when you say you need to solve for supply first, what you actually mean is that you need to solve
Supplier.
for supplier first.
And in a used car market, the
There is no
supplier
concept. There is no
a
concept.
single time seller.
Exactly. There is no concept of supplier. So solving for supply at least in the Indian context. So solving for supply means solving for seller, right? And for the seller, it is a one-time selling, and it is an opportunistic selling. Buy side, it's a special, emotional, important purchase. You need to be, more than sure about quality, reliability, experience. But on the supply side, you are bothered only about the price you are getting. So it is a one-time opportunistic selling. So the question is that who will be able to provide the most competitive price on the supply side? Obviously, the guy who is able to charge the highest premium on the demand side. So if you are able to win demand side narrative, then with time, in turn, you will automatically win the supply side.
What was the gap that you saw on the demand side back in 2015? What did you feel was missing in the market?
There was no guarantee of quality. There was no accountability, and the kind of treatment, the kind of experience people wanted, and the kind of seamlessness they wanted in the transaction. There was a lot of ambiguity around pricing, lots of haggling, right? No accountability regarding the quality of the car, and the overall treatment and the engagement and the experience was also completely broken.